Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Conversations That Count. I am Lisa Gable, Vice Chair of Community Strategy and Engagement for Fairfax GOP and 11th Congressional District. As part of community engagement, I have been inviting community influencers, candidates, subject matter experts on Conversations That Count so they can shed light on most important topics that matter to all of us and the communities that we live in. As you all know, political roles have become increasingly complex and demanding. Complexity demands great leaders to lead. Great leaders come from good leadership trainings and having great mentors. Although political mentoring is like other types of mentoring, the political context introduces important challenges that are important in shaping how mentoring is best structured. To discuss all of this week, I have invited Lisa Gable. Lisa is recognized worldwide as a turnaround mastermind and innovative businesswoman. For more than 30 years, she has been called to turn around failing organizations, businesses, teams, nonprofit political campaigns, and government projects and solve seemingly intractable problems. Over time, Lisa has learned the key to course correct when things go south with diplomacy and humanity, taking care of relationships and forging strong partnerships. As a CEO and former US ambassador and advisor to Fortune 500 companies, Lisa has orchestrated the successful turnarounds of private and public organizations in all sectors and industries. Not only all of this, Lisa has worked for 4 US presidents, including our favorite President Reagan, Senior George H.W. Bush. She is dynamic, powerful, and dedicated leader, mentor, and teacher to many, and has empowered thousands of people all over the world. In this conversation, I personally would like to learn what drives Lisa, and I'm sure you would like to too. I also would like to learn from Lisa how she identifies the need for this kind of shift, change, and at times turn around, especially in political world that we live in right now. I'm honored to be joined by Lisa Gable, and I'm sure you will be thrilled to learn from her. Lisa, welcome to Conversations That Count.
Well, it's so good to be with you this evening on such a beautiful weekend.
Thank you, Lisa. So Lisa, first things first, I'm sure listeners would love to learn more about you. I'm interested in knowing your personal leadership journey. How did you get here?
Well, as you've gathered, I'm not necessarily a shrinking violet. I've flown into war zones. I've flown in a helicopter over the DMZ. I've even been on television with Big Bird in Japan and not lost my dignity. So I've had many, many extreme experiences. But one of the key elements is that I was often the odd girl out. I started my career in the Reagan administration. I began as a 19-year-old working at the Department of Education and was the person they sent out to talk about the privatization of student loans. I then moved over to the Pentagon and to the White House. And so I had an opportunity to really be having a front row seat to the collapse of the Soviet Union and see Gorbachev and Margaret Thatcher come to the White House. Then, as you pointed out, I later ended up going to Intel Corporation, spending my time in Silicon Valley, and that's really where I got my business start. The key theme is that I've done turnarounds in business, government, and philanthropy. I've normally worked in the manufacturing sector, so for car manufacturers, food and beverage, pharmaceutical, Intel and high tech, but very much focused on using process to solve complex problems and using process in the political realm to bring people to solutions together where they're not getting along so well.
So Lisa, and particularly in politics, I was fascinated when I came to know that you started in Reagan administration at the age of 19. How did that happen?
So there used to be one political appointment that was held open for a college student. It was called the Student Liaison Officer. And I had been interning in Washington the summer prior between my freshman and sophomore year of college. And I was going to school throughout the year. I was someone who wanted to get done with school quickly. And so going to night school while I was being an intern, gaining credits wherever I could. And I applied for the job. And that job really came about at the time they were privatizing student loans. And so that was a big deal. And what I was putting myself through school, I paid my own way through undergrad. I paid my way through graduate school by getting a full scholarship to Georgetown for my master's program. But I understood what it took for someone to have to pay their way and take jobs throughout school. And they felt I was well positioned to talk about why the private sector could provide more solutions, more cost-effective solutions, not only for the government, but also for the students.
So, Lisa, it's kind of interesting. I really wanted to bring in Reagan. Recently, I attended an event for one of our candidates, Yesli Vega, who is a phenomenal candidate. And we had NRCC chairman Tom Emmer, and we also had a past congressional candidate, Caleb Max, a dynamic candidate. He was one of the not nominee candidate running for 10th congressional district. As a young man asked a very intelligent question, saying that everybody talks about Reagan, and after Reagan passed away, they really didn't have, young kids don't have a role model to talk about. And while we were having a discussion right before this, you kind of started on talking about that during your journey of this leadership, you really wanted to be one of those individuals that recognized it. But other than you, I've never had that conversation with anyone else. I felt like you immediately recognized that young people need to have more mentors than all of us sitting and saying, oh, during Reagan era, we had all of this. Then what happened to younger generation that can't relate to Reagan era anymore? Can you kind of elaborate on your journey and what you try to tell me?
Sure. So what was nice about the Reagan administration is we knew when we took our jobs that we had three goals. One was to reduce the size of government. The second was to lower taxes. And the third was to win the Cold War. What that did is it blew open the world as our sandbox. And what I mean by that, and where I had a unique opportunity, is that I was entering into Silicon Valley when Intel Corporation and Hewlett Packard and Oracle were billion-dollar companies. But as you saw the fall of the wall in Berlin, and you saw those countries all opening up, that was the first time truly in history that large companies, auto companies, consumer product goods companies like PepsiCo and Coca-Cola, companies like Intel, they could set up manufacturing sites all over the world, all over the world. We could sell all over the world. That didn't exist before. And so that realization that all we had worked for, that focus that we had, brought that about. And what we were talking about before we started is when I had 20 years, right? 20 years to just hit the road running. I was living in Taiwan. I spent a lot of time in Asia. So many of us got to get to the Middle East, but the world has been contracting, really starting again in 2001. And we saw that with 9/11 and the changes in airlines. All of a sudden, it wasn't as easy to get places. We saw the 2009 crisis and the recession at that point in time. And then we now have COVID. And so what we really need to do is help young people get back what Ronald Reagan saw, which is the realm of possibility. We've done it before, we can do it again. But they've had a contraction. They're where they've come into the world has been a contraction. But what I found consistently is that when my daughter, who's now 24, when she was a Senate page in Virginia at the Capitol, working with Bill Bowling, when she went off to college kids, her friends, this 24-year-old, the fact that I worked for Ronald Reagan is the biggest deal on the face of the earth to them. Young people are going back and saying, wait a second, let's go back in history. There was a point where we were positive. There was a point where people were willing to collaborate. There was a point where we looked at the world and said, we can have the world as our sandbox. And so what I want to do at this phase of my life is help those people, help people who are watching right now, helping people who want to run for office because they had the ability to be a change agent. We lived and experienced all those major changes. So to some degree, we have the blueprint. We can actually help them take that blueprint and reapply it again and ensure that US becomes that technological superpower that we once were.
It's kind of funny when you said it was just a reality check for me, Lisa. You said world is contracting with all these technological advances and aviation industry growing. You would think world will expand, right? Globalization, or the liberals like to say, you would think world is expanding, but in reality, you think with all this expanding of the government, world is actually contracting. So we just really, and also I think to your point, what Tom has said is what the progressive elites are saying is that we will give you handouts for you. So come to us. But what Reagan tried to emphasize is we will show you what you can do for yourself to make your lives better. We won't give you anything, but we'll show you the way to how to make your things better. So that's why I think college kids, if you only articulate as well as you are doing, college kids can really get attracted to us as Reaganites, I would say. But Lisa, let me get to that political mentoring that you just said. I think you can articulate this better than anyone with all the leadership roles that you've held over your period of leadership. How is political mentoring, even if it is it different than any other types of mentoring? If it is,
it is. And there are two different ways. When I was at the White House, I was in presidential personnel, which basically operates like the executive search firm for an administration, right? We're going out there, we're finding people, we're putting them into jobs. The Secretary of the Commonwealth does the same thing in Virginia. And the thing that I learned, I interviewed over 1,000 people. I saw thousands of resumes. And when you're doing that at my age, at that point, I think I was 22 years old, you're basically studying how people move up the ladder, right? Like you see that there's things you got to check off the box. And there are in any career, if someone's following a linear path in any manufacturing sector, yes, there's certain things you need to do. The same thing in politics. And so one of the number one things that I have committed my life to doing and have spent a great deal of time focused on is credentialing people. You need to credential people and helping people understand how they might be able to publish articles, how they might serve on a board or commission, how they can do volunteer work, both within a committee, within the political spectrum, but also in other areas. People want people with real lived experience. And so there are certain credentials in politics that people look to. You may have worked on a number of campaigns and then doing what you're doing, which is engaging with party leadership. That's one side of the credentials. Another aspect of the credentials is becoming an expert on certain types of policies and perhaps being at the table. And guess what? If no table exists, the wonderful thing about our country is you can create one. I think that's one thing. People always wait to be asked. They wait for somebody else to open up the door. A lot of women have said, oh, well, that door was shut to me. And I learned something when I was a cheerleader in high school. I tried out for a cheerleading squad and I didn't get on the top squad. So my friends and I, we started our own squad. And then we went to the national championships and we beat the other squad. If you understand that we live in the greatest democracy, there's nothing inhibiting anybody who's listening right now from not starting their own table. If you see a major issue, go out, grab somebody, grab 2 or 3 people, and start focusing on what you can do in order to make that change. And then that serves as your credential. You get to point to that. So if you want a political appointment someday for a governor or for a president, if you want to work on Capitol Hill, or if instead you want to be that catalyst who maybe stays in a corporate job but helps move candidates forward, then we need to get them credentialed. And for anyone listening, that is the number one thing in political mentoring.
Yeah, but let me ask you, I think, Lisa, while you're talking, you talked about multiple things. Is that any different than civil positions? I mean, or let's say if there is any person that's sitting out there thinking that, should I have a separate resume for political resume? Or should I start preparing for a political resume versus my real job resume? Is that how it works?
You do need 2 resumes. So there's no question about it. I have my political resume and then I have my professional resume. Sometimes those things intersect, particularly when I've been involved in a particular area of public policy. It might be a regulatory issue that deals with energy or food and beverage manufacturing or sales. But you do have 2 resumes. There is a point where later in your career, it really does become 1 resume. And what I mean by this is, work on those, keep track of stuff. One good thing about going through security clearances is you learn to keep track of stuff. My mother was really good at it. So she's the one that actually remembered all the places I'd been in the world because I had to declare that. But, when you work on a campaign, when you fundraise, when you are volunteering in an office, when you do something from a political standpoint, one of those political credentials, keep a list of those items. And when you're applying for an opportunity, you want to show people that you have professional credentials. People need to be able to survive in the real world. We want people who had lived experiences in real jobs, having to deal with revenue to get those jobs, right? But if you want to demonstrate the fact that you've been in the trenches and you've been helping other people along the way to grow the party, then you need to document that. And older people who've been around for a long time can help you understand what those steps up the ladder are that you need in order to build those credentials to have influence.
Absolutely. Lisa, this is so valuable. I hope more young people that are trying to kind of build up their resume start listening to you as well. So Lisa, while you're having this conversation in the past 5 minutes, you spoke about women, right? And when I was invited to one of the women empowerment, we do this Women's History Month and all of that, I said the same thing. If you feel anytime that you are not invited to the table and you deserve to be at that table, bring your own chair. Gone are those days where you're like, where is my chair? Just make a space for yourself, because I mean, we can't just sit around and start looking around and saying, "Where's my chair?" There is no way around, right? So talk to us. I mean, is it? I know I hate to be one of those one of those persons sitting around and say play a victim role, but do you think it is harder for women to get into this political role than male, or it is no different?
It can be harder. I'm not gonna say that it's not. It can be harder, and there are two reasons for that. One is from the lives that we're living. Sometimes we keep getting pulled off to take care of an aging parent or take care of our children at different points in their education, and so that level of consistency, especially one of the things, I'll be frank with you, that I don't like is that we still stick with the mode that you have to attend meetings on Saturday afternoons or in the evening. Well, if you have young children who are in sports and you've got to go to the soccer game, I used to recruit people and said, you know, really, I need you to come to that district meeting. Well, it's all day on a Saturday, and they'd sit there through the whole thing. And they're like, Lisa, I got to go pick up my kids at the soccer match, or this is a big soccer time. And so I do think that makes it hard. It not only makes it hard for women, it makes it hard to identify and recruit people who are young families, right? Or women who are not married at all, but they're executives and they're moving up the career ladder, so they can't go do something at nighttime when they're supposed to go to an event. Therefore, you've got to be super smart how you get yourself credentialed. I mean, I think that's really my point. And you can do that by defining your own role. I had no inhibition. I was taught by one of my mentors, speak with facts. One thing you can't tell on the screen is I'm a really tiny person. And so I have this funny picture I showed during my speeches of me at the age of 28, surrounded by a group of men in the military. And I'm about this big and they're about this big. And it's a funny picture. Everybody laughs, I laugh. And my mentor taught me, you know, there was nothing I could do to make myself look bigger. I couldn't eat more. I couldn't grow. I couldn't, you know, I tried cutting my hair and then I looked even younger. But he would tell me, speak with facts, do your homework in advance, and identify the purple elephant in the room before you walk into that room. Do your research and ask that one critical question that needs to be asked. And you own the purple elephant. Other people just show up. They just show up at whatever it is. They might just show up at the campaign, or they might just show up at that county meeting, or they may just show up at a political event. And what you need to do as women is do your homework in advance, think through what's the big purple elephant, what's the underlying cause of the problem that we're all there to solve. And you don't have to dominate during the meeting. Again, I have a small body, a small voice. So I would wait for the lull in the conversation. I'd raise my hand and I ask the question that needs to be asked. And I can't begin to tell you how after that, me sitting with a group of military men or me sitting in a room full of, you know, engineers, people go, yeah, what she said, because I did my homework. I thought about it. And that's how you just have to outsmart people through the process. You need to do your homework, and you need to identify those opportunities. You may not be able to show up and sit in the front row at 10 meetings, but when you show up, be ready to talk, because people will remember that you were there.
Lisa, if not anything, I hope people remember just that one sentence, right? I think I'll play to my daughter over and over again. Again, my daughter is also one of those petite 5-foot girl, and she probably had that is a lifelong lesson because there's nothing she can do to change that. And I'm sure there are a lot of short girls out there. There's nothing, and there's nothing wrong with that. I said I'm too is 5'1". There's nothing I can do to change that of mine. So you do your homework and stop playing victim and saying that nobody pays attention to me. I think you do your homework, take that, understand what that purple elephant is, know your content, and ask the right questions. I mean, I think people will respect you for taking the time to do your homework. You said two things there, mentoring, but I also have a follow-up question about sponsoring. I've been hearing about that in corporate world and also in these conferences about leadership. I do want to get to that, but I also want to ask you about this once we finish about this women's leadership. But would there be, is it better to get into these political roles when you're younger? Is it more advantageous to get into it? Or is it better to get into it once you're matured? I mean, I wouldn't call it as older. I said matured adult. I mean, I know people that are out there are like, should I just wait it out? Kids, I mean, I have been multiple times in that position where I'm like, when is the right time, or is there is no right time? Every time is the right time.
There is no right time. You want to do it when you're motivated to do it. What I will say is if you're single, if you're young and single, take advantage of the fact that you're young and single and get those points on the board now, because when you have kids, it's just hard. It's just difficult. And so I really thought about it in advance. There were certain points I wanted on my board, points I wanted on my resume. And I really was very strategic about getting those items on there before I got married. And then I still, as we talked about your political resume, the good thing about your political resume is I know that there's questions about, how long you keep everything on your resume. Politics, they want to know everything. They really do. If it's 20 years ago and you were out there schlepping around and setting up signs for, the county treasurer, stick it on there because people want to know that you've been committed and it's not just popping up to take advantage of a moment. People do want to see people who've been out there, fighting the fight for the things that they believe in. And so then what you can do during your 30s is you find those opportunities, maybe while you've got young children, that you stay involved, but maybe you recognize, you don't have the time. So that when you enter back in later on, when you have enough money to write a check, and I'm not going to, I'm not going to lie to anybody. And I think this is harder for women. Men get farther because they write big checks. And when I talk to women in corporate world, when I'm in philanthropy, and I've been on the board of some of the largest, philanthropic efforts like Girl Scouts of the USA, women need to write checks. You just have to. It's a basic credential. It gives you, if you have the money to do it, write the check. And if you're the one involved in politics and your husband's not, which is the case in our family, I write the check. We don't write it from the family. I write the check. And because it's a paper trail. It's that breadcrumbs. It's that point where you really want to, this is your moment. You've gotten close to somebody. This is where you're going to come in and get engaged. Then you've done all the groundwork. You've laid the path. You've built the credibility. And the good news is you've met a lot of people along the way. I still am pulling people in that I met back in, when did I start? 1981. Still 1981. So you don't have to dedicate all of your life to it. You have the rest of your life. And we as political people who believe in a passion and we actually want people who have experience. We want people with real life business experience or running a foundation experience, being in a not-for-profit, maybe working in a government agency. We want people who've actually had to solve real problems.
Absolutely. So, Lisa, this has been such an enriching discussion. This is great. I wish you would come to a lot of our GOP units and kind of talk to people, and especially young people. I think as they're building up careers, I think they should just really kind of use your knowledge as blueprint and start working towards it. Let's move on to mentoring. I think mentoring is a very popular word, Lisa. Everyone knows about mentoring, but recently, as I'm going through tons of leadership conferences, I keep hearing the word sponsoring. I'm not sure if that's a trend right now. They said it's mentoring is great, but in order to kind of continue to grow in your political world or professional world, find sponsors. Is that something that you're hearing, or is that new word?
It's interesting. I just heard it for the first time last week, and I was in Dallas speaking to a group of 350 women in high tech.
Okay.
Here's where I break it down and say it's slightly different. So you have mentors who are there for you at a moment in time, right? You've got a boss at work. Maybe you meet somebody that you're trying to move over a hurdle, or you're trying to enter a new path, and they mentor you in that moment in time. And so you want those moment in time mentors. But what you also want to find are people who will be there for you without. There are young people who worked for me when I was a US ambassador for the World's Fair in Japan, that worked for me when they were 21. I wrote their letters of recommendation to grad school, their first jobs, helping get internships, in top tier organizations. Those same people, I then wrote their letters of recommendation about 6 years later for the next move up. And then now they're all in their early 40s, and I'm still writing letters of recommendation. I have people that have done that for me. Elaine Chow did that for me. I met Elaine when I was 21 years old. She's always been there for me. I don't bug Elaine, but she's always been a person that I can rely on to validate my value. Barbara Barrett, who's Secretary of the Air Force and was a U.S. ambassador to Finland, also has been on the board of a lot of Fortune 500 companies. She's always been that person for me. I have a 2-star female admiral that I can call. And so you want to look at, so that's technically sponsorship, right? Those are people who say, Barbara replaced me on board. So when she left a board, she put me on the board. And I try to do that too. Whenever I leave a board, whether it's a political board, a board of commission, a corporate board, whatever it is, I replace myself with another woman. And because Barbara did that for me. So was she my sponsor? Yeah, she was my sponsor. She did that for me from age 21 until I was about 34 years old.
Wow.
So you want different types of relationships. I guess that's what I'm getting to, is that you're going to need that person who's there with you for the long haul, and recognizes that we need linkages. It's very hard. I say this in STEM. If we help, somebody from an underserved community just get into college, you need to help them find their first job. You need to help them get into graduate school. You can't just leave them there. It's not like they're all going to figure it out next time around. So is that a sponsor? Yes, or maybe it's just consistent mentorship.
So Lisa, I think we need more of you in this world. I think this word, I heard about this. I'm part of World Hospital Federation. This is an international hospital federation. I was part of their conference call, and the CEO, who I think one of the reasons I even joined is she's a physical therapist. If you're a physical therapist, you get to greater lengths, but it's always very, very hard to get into C-suite. Not that you can't, but it's very challenging. And she got into C-suite, and she's a hospital CEO in UK. So since she was speaking, I said, oh my God, I'm a physical therapist by background. I said, I'm going to support this young lady. So I sat through that, and she spoke very highly, just like you. She says somebody mentored her, sponsored her for decades. That's why she is where she is, and she plans to do that with other females. I said, I hope there are more people like you and her in this world that kind of bring along those females that are capable and are deserving, so that those folks come along. So I do have a lot of GOP unit leaders, and I myself am part of a couple of 11th congressional district leaders who are all great people. So we all want to promote our young people, right? Young Republicans, young college Republicans, high school Republicans, and so on and so forth. So how do we place these young people in core operational and strategic roles and broaden their scope of experience? As you know, they don't have as much experience, but how do we kind of place in core operational and strategic roles confidently so they can broaden their scope of experience? How do we do that?
If you have people that you're really impressed with and you think they're the next generation that's going to be able to help support, a strong economic environment, a strong national security, help them. And what I mean by helping them is that, yes, they'll come to you and they'll ask for a letter of recommendation, but I call people and I go, hey, I just saw this opening. I think you should apply for it. So I keep my eye out. We all get our email boxes filled with stuff. But one of the things that I get quite frequently are fellowships. I get fellowships for people in public health through the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. I help people outside of the political sphere a lot because I do believe helping smart people up the ladder, no matter what their politics and business, is a good idea. You want to help, you want smart people out there that care about other people and are willing to engage in collaborative and bipartisan efforts. Having said that, when I see a fellowship program, it comes across my email, I send it out to somebody, hey, apply for this one, go do that. Or if I hear about a speaking opportunity, maybe somebody's putting together a panel and I say, hey, why don't you get a young person? We do this in the drug discovery area, which is that there's a concept called, as you know, voice of the patient, right? You want the patient to talk about their life. And so we'll bring young people and we'll put them on panels with older individuals who are doing drug discovery. And we'll have them talking about the struggles in their life and what it's like to live with the disease. Do the same thing in panels that you have. If we're talking about solving economic problems, guess what? People in the audience should hear from college students that are looking for jobs. They should hear from a mom who's 32 years old and has a child with a learning disability that's struggling in the school, whether it's public or private, to find the right resources for that child. We have the ability with the things we control to give someone their moment in the sun, to allow them to not only elevate themselves, but secondarily is they can enrich a conversation. We did it in Girl Scouts. We would bring in girls who are gold award winners, which is equal to being an Eagle Scout. And we'd bring them into the conversation so they could explain to people what it was like trying to do the thing they were trying to do. Because how can we make rules for people unless we understand people's pain points? We can't. And so let them be the voice, elevate them. You know, if you're doing a podcast, invite a young person to be on your podcast, do a special.
Absolutely. Lisa, this is amazing conversation and thank you for joining. So Lisa, this is all well and good, but let me also kind of put a little slightly spin to it. What would you tell those young people or just people that are so ambitious? Sometimes they tend to lose that side of things that they need to put in the work to grow and also invest in others and not always look out for themselves. I know this happens. I mean, not everyone is, I think, I'm not just going to sit and brag about me at all. I also have one of those mentorship mentality. I love to mentor. I like to grow. In fact, I think one of my job satisfaction is I enjoy mentoring folks. It gives me pleasure when someone says that, hey, Shri, thank you for letting me grow. Thank you for letting me cross train. I feel like my skills are so much better. It just gives me immense pleasure. Obviously, I can definitely never compare your experience with mine. I think I have very limited scope and practice, but that gives me pleasure and joy, purpose and joy, which I'll come to you next. But I've also seen a lot of people that are very self-centered, that only look out for themselves. I know have a lot of potential. They continue to grow in their career, but never look out for their own team members or even in their own political careers. I'm like, what do you tell those people?
Yeah, those are the people you don't want to help. My dad was someone who mentored a lot of people, and he never was attracted by what I call the shiny new penny. And the people you're talking about, they look good on TV, they're good looking, they're ambitious. And so people are really impressed with them. And then there's the guy who's kind of nerdy in the background and he's doing all the work. Well, my dad would go find a nerdy guy in the background who's doing all the work and say, you know what? Let's get you into a class to learn public speaking. Let's put you into Toastmasters. Let's give you an opportunity to be the one that we feature at the meeting. So hubris is the number one downfall in any turnaround. So trust me, I don't want to be promoting people who are so impressed with themselves that they're not willing to do the work that's required. I don't want people who step on top of other people. But what you can do, and I did learn this from my father, is as we get older, we know that there's ways to dress, ways to look, ways to speak, things you need to do, ways to behave in meetings, ways to present information and build an agenda. That's teachable. That's teachable information. So find those people who have that special sauce. There's that unique thing about them. That's that thing that can really open up the next door we're trying to open up. And then you can teach them all the other stuff that helps empower them. So bottom line is, what I guess I'm saying is, don't always be impressed with the shiny new penny. And I'm also kind of a mom. So I have what I call my coming to God conversations. And recently I had a group of young people who had a student run organization, and they were all fighting with each other. So I pulled each one in individually and I had a coming to God conversation. I'm like, okay, this is not about you. We are stewards of an institution that we serve. We are all here for a moment in time. A moment in time, steward of an institution. And if you take yourself out of it and you recognize that you are not supposed to use the institution to benefit yourself, you're supposed to be a steward for the institution to accomplish the good that it's required to do, and the whole reason it was started in the first place. So sometimes it takes that little reminder to sort of knock some sense into people and get people to understand, hey, whoa, you got to step back. You got to do the hard work. You've got to remember that you're making decisions about the institution. You're not making a decision about what gives you more personal power.
Absolutely. Understand the mission. Very good. Lisa, talk to me about turnaround. I see the books. I've heard so much. I do need to read, but I've heard so much about the book. I've heard you speak about it on various channels. Please provide an executive summary about the book.
So the book's about turnarounds I did in business, government, and philanthropy. And I was brought in as the Hail Mary pass for a situation that was going south, but a major philanthropist, a billionaire philanthropist, president of the United States, the CEO of a company, needed for a particular activity to happen for a reason. And so even though the thing was not working very well, they couldn't shut it down. They still needed to accomplish the objective. And so I was brought in to apply the processes I learned at Intel Corporation, and I combine it with what I call the art of diplomacy that I learned at the State Department and the White House, and developed a process where I can help people look at the future state of where they want to be, and then break down the past and understand what went wrong in the past. And in some cases, you've got to mentally burn the institution to the ground, and we should do that on a few regulatory efforts, and then build back up so you get to your future state. And if you do that, and you do it through collaboration, you do it through partnerships, and you do it methodically, where you're really ranking and rating and focusing on what's the number one thing you need to do, you can execute with speed, confidence, agility, and heart. Because the reality is, everything that you do is your impact on the world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Lisa, what next after this book? I know, as I said, I've heard such great reviews about the book. I hope you have something else planned for another book.
Yeah, I've talked a lot about possibly doing a book about leadership. I've had the opportunity to meet leaders in multiple different industries and government in different countries, and being able to write another book that focuses on that. And then also, people, if you want to, I write for CEO World magazine, for a magazine called Sway, which is about women's leadership, and for the Diplomatic Courier, which is a national security magazine. And so I write quite a bit, and you can read the different articles and columns that I write on a weekly or monthly basis through my LinkedIn account or through those magazines.
So, Lisa, I'm having some questions through Facebook. As I mentioned during the beginning of our show, we do have a good amount of audience. And one of the questions that came from Laura Robinson is, Lisa, when a young Republican woman is running for politics for the first time, say for something like school board or board of supervisor, what kind of support can she leverage from the party at the county, district, or state level? I'm sure you may have a real hard time answering that, because you have to be really active in the party to say that, but you're pretty much like in a worldwide speaker, you're out there trying to do, but it seems the Republican Party doesn't provide the funding. It's more of a party question, but I think, do you have any words of advice for Laura?
I do. Yes. I think what you want to do, and Laura, thank you. It was good to see you the other day at Huncow's breakfast. You need to go and sell your story. And what I would tell women who are running is focus on a primary theme. Harken back to Ronald Reagan. What did he talk about? I'm going to reduce the size of government, lower taxes, win the Cold War. you need to think about jobs 1, 2, and 3. Focus on the primary reason why you're running. Don't become distracted and sell your mission. You're selling your vision to a group of people that you're asking to give you access to an apparatus, in some cases to funding, in order to support your initiative. And what I've seen is some women don't go in, they talk about a whole lot of things, right? So the number one thing you need to do is practice, 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 practice. Before I meet with the CEO, before I meet with a billionaire, before I meet with an elected official, I literally sit in front of the mirror and I think through the 3 things I'm going to say, the number one thing I want to accomplish, and I make the ask. Because no matter what institution you are persuading to do something for you, you have to do those things and you have to do them extremely effectively. And then what you have to show them is how you're going to win. They're all going to ask you, how are you going to win? They're going to ask you, how much money can you put into this race personally? How much money do you think you can raise? How are you going to raise that money? That's the other piece of the puzzle that I've sat on many committees across the United States for many different elected offices. Always the question that people stumble on. It costs money. It just does. And so you need to walk in saying, this is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to handle my fundraising. This is how much money I can raise. This is where I see my money coming together. Either I think I can raise X amount through small dollar donations, and this is how I'm going to do it. Or I have these 3 major donors and they'll back me.
Absolutely. That is, I think, the fantastic way. I mean, I had a wise gentleman tell me, sit in front of the mirror and practice your speech before every single time. It kind of improves your confidence as well. So since Laura has asked good question about what can the party do. So Lisa, if you could wave a magic wand, what would you like the political organizations like RPV or even unit GOPs? I mean, what would you tell them to support candidates or potential candidates like Laura Robinson do to nurture the environment for next generations? What can they do?
2 things. One is, I grew up working with Lee Atwater and Haley Barbour at the White House. And what they did is that they identified people to run. My father-in-law was also the chair of the Republican Party in Kentucky.
Wow.
He identified people to run. And then if they lost, they found a place for them. They credentialed them. They found them the next place. What we do very badly is when our candidates lose, and we've got a great candidate, and I think we need more diverse candidates. I'm so excited to see Hung and Yesley and all these, Karen Lipman, we have a wide variety of diverse candidates running right now. Winsome Sears, is that if they lose, we don't do anything with them. Okay, Ronald Reagan lost a few times. So have a very concerted effort to say, great race, glad you did it. Thanks for running. You didn't win this time. Let's do this with you. And so keep them in the process. Don't lose that energy. The second thing is, I think we need to revamp how we run the structure of the party. I mentioned earlier, my personal pet peeve, and I'll be very honest about it on Facebook Live, is we have these demands related to things that are at nighttime or lots of meetings or on a Saturday during people's kids, sporting activities. We are leaving so many people out of the political spectrum by making it difficult for them to participate in credentialing themselves in the party. We have got to think about that. Worked back in 1960. It's not working today. We have Zoom. We have different ways that we can actually help people become leaders in the party that are flexible. We talk about a flexible workforce. Well, we need a flexible party system where it has standards, it has requirements, there are things you have to do, but give them flexibility because we are leaving a lot of people behind right now.
I think, Lisa, that's actually a wonderful thing that you brought up, because even for young people, I think the reason 30s and young professionals don't get involved is as they start having kids. They leave the workforce too, and they leave the political world because they just really can't, they get burnt out. And I think we just really need to create, and also we don't want to make the roles unmanageable. world. I think we get into the nooks and crooks of things. Sometimes we debate amongst ourselves. I mean, I hate to admit this. Sometimes I just don't go into general membership meetings, and I shouldn't be admitting this because I get boggled down with those arguments. I just get disengaged coming back. I would rather continue using my spirit and my positive energy into outreach. I just get so disengaged after going to those meetings. I just don't go sometimes.
I agree with you. I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
shoot me. I can't. I traveled in my last job. I traveled 70% of my time. 70% of my time. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. You know, and so there has to be another way. We need to think about, if we were starting this from scratch today with all the technology that's available to us, how would we design it? And guess what? The federal government needs to do the same thing. If you are building that federal program today, you never design it the way that it operates because it hasn't calculated in all the innovation that currently exists that allows you to deliver. We're always talking about two things. We're creating revenue, we're spending money. We're creating goods and services, we're delivering them to people. Better, faster, cheaper. How quickly can we move a solution to an individual? That's all that it's about. And what's most important, we can't fight around the edges. We need to do what Ronald Reagan did. 3 things. That's it. 3 things. What's going to have the greatest impact? And make sure you agree on the path forward for those things. And then let the other stuff go. Just let it go.
Absolutely. Process improvements. Keep it lean, keep it lean. So Lisa, I mean, a lot of organizations are starting to talk about purpose and joy. As I heard such great things about you. I have to thank one of our good friend, Heather, that recommended me to you. And as I was starting to learn more about you, I heard you speak about purpose and joy so eloquently. And I just started learning about it from several organizations. So as we are coming close to the end of the conversations, I wanted to hear from you about purpose and joy. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Sure. What I mean by that is people need to remember the world doesn't happen to you, you happen to it. Every deliverable you leave speaks to your impact on the world around you. You get purpose and joy when you help someone else over the finish line, when you link arms with other people, when you find ways to collaborate, when you realize that you can create a team and make something a team effort. And most importantly, how you react to success, how you react to failure, who you lift up with you along the way. That says what your legacy is. And I think what people don't understand is each of us, there's small bites. Each of us can do something, whether it's going on Facebook and you see that somebody's saying something, give them an atta girl, put a comment in that supports what they say. That small gesture leaves an impact on that person and helps advance what they're trying to do. So don't think about purpose and joy as being, I have to do all these big things. Recognize the impact that you have by the small bites that you take and the small things you can do. The fact that somebody I met at a dinner contacted you and said, talk to this person. And we talked. That wasn't a big lift, right? But here we are. We're talking to all these people on Facebook Live. So don't think, well, I can't do it. And you get such joy out of when you help somebody get another job, right? So mentoring, finding ways to work together, that's what your passion is. And then also reflecting on the good that you've done, because it is good. It may not be huge in somebody else's mind, but each of us are leaving those pebbles along the way.
Absolutely. I hear that, Lisa, President George H.W. Bush used to write personal letters. I think you said it in one of your interviews. Is that accurate? Because you've had personal relationships with him. Is that you worked for him? I mean, is that my understanding?
Well, I did. And, you know, I didn't know him well. I knew President George W. Bush a little bit better. None of them I knew well, but his letter writing, and I'm glad you brought it up. When I was the CEO of a medical research foundation, I wrote during COVID, I wrote 500 personal notes. I wrote personal notes to every single donor, different advocates. I just kept a pile. I thought, you know what, if George Bush could do this, I can do this too. I kept a pile of cards on my desk and I would write 5 cards a day and I would mail them out during COVID. and the impact that had on people. And that's what I mean. People need encouragement. Life is tough. And life's really tough right now. We didn't pop out of COVID the way that we thought we were. The economy not doing so great. We've got geopolitical conflict. A lot of people are depressed. So be that person who does that one nice thing, as the president did. I still have, I mean, my dad, that was one thing he kept. He kept his card from George H.W. Bush. That's something special. And that letter writing, it's the easiest thing to do, and do it the old fashioned way. People love going to a mailbox, opening it up. Email's good too, but there's nothing more special than getting a thing with a stamp on it that somebody wrote and signed to you and just said, great job, thank you very much.
Absolutely. Lisa, while you talked about geopolitics, I need to let you go. I mean, I know I keep prolonging the conversation. I know that you're you have been involved geopolitically as a U.S. ambassador, and you know quite a bit about what's going on in Ukraine. Any final words or thoughts about Ukraine? I mean, I know you have been working with delegates out there.
I'm working with women. I've been working with a group of women since pretty much early on in the war. And I'm actually going to be speaking to a couple hundred women who are in Ukraine. They didn't leave. They're LinkedIn professionals. We found them through LinkedIn. They're professionals who stayed in Ukraine. Some left and some have come back. But what I can tell you is these women are inspiring for many, many reasons. But as they were literally, a friend of mine who's Ukrainian who fled with her family did this poll. And what she found is that 95% of them wanted to stay in their jobs. 95% of them. People are doing the great resignation throughout the United States. And these women wanted to stay in their jobs. They were going to take a job. They lost their jobs. They wanted to find a job. So keep an eye on the work that we're doing. There might be some way that people can help those women, because they're having to do it in a period of great ambiguity. And so they're looking for partners, they're looking for mentoring, they're looking for relationships. There's so many things we can still do to support this incredibly brave and dedicated group of professional women who have both stayed in the country and have had to leave the country, and in some cases have returned.
So, Lisa, I know you've been mentored to many, many, many thousands of people all through your career. Who has been your best mentor, and what is the one best advice you received?
Well, as I said, Barbara Barrett, who was Secretary of the Air Force, was the person. I met her in the basement of the White House under Reagan. My boss was 2 hours late. We sat there. I was in grad school at nighttime. And she said, I need to introduce you to my husband. It turned out her husband was a senior vice president in Intel and would become CEO and chairman of the board of Intel. But as I said, the number one thing Barbara did is that when she left something, when she left a board, she put me on that board. When you leave a seat at the table, because of whatever reason you've had to leave it, go find somebody that you want to help and put them in your seat. And there's one board in California, and I think we're on our fourth person. It's now been 25 years that daisy chain, that, the barrel of monkeys is still going on, where we've all committed to when I left the table, then we put somebody else in. When she left the table, she put somebody else in. Just keep it going.
Absolutely. Lisa, thank you so very much. It's been an honor for me to speak to you. I am grateful that you took the time to join Fairfax County GOP Conversations That Count. I would like for you to continue to stay engaged with us. We have a lot of young generations. One of my role is to continue to strategize, continue to engage more women, more suburban women, more minorities, more immigrant groups, and bring in high qualified speakers like you that would speak on diverse topics such as this. And I think for me, political mentorship is very important, as you know, in Republican Party especially. If you kind of go into any boardroom or board meetings or even convention, you kind of don't see as many young people. You don't political resume and how to develop mentors, how to actually mentor other people too, how not to be selfish, but just really go out of your way to mentorship. This has been actually very, very valuable. I'm going to go ahead and replay for myself, and I hope many people will start listening to this conversation. Any last words of wisdom before I conclude this?
Well, I just want to say thank you so much for inviting me. I mean, I believe so strongly in this and really see this as my purpose in life now as I'm in my third stage of life, my late 50s. I've retired and working, doing different boards and things. But I really appreciate what you do, and I really appreciate what the women who are watching do. What I love about the Fairfax group and the women that I've met in Northern Virginia is we have a very diverse Republican Party. And I'm so proud. I'm so proud when I see what you're doing, looking at bringing in people who are Buddhist, people who are Muslim, people, Christians. My dad helped start some of the original outreach between Christians and Jews. And the power of what that has brought about for the last 50 years is really amazing when I look back at who he brought together. You all are doing the same thing. Our party is based on the freedom to choose and the opportunities of being involved in guiding our own destinations. That's what brought all these people to this country. And that's the common thread that we have. It doesn't matter what our religion is. It doesn't matter what country we were born in. Everybody that we're working with in Northern Virginia either came themselves from another country, their families did, but we're all here because we have the opportunity to vote. We have the opportunity to be involved in the economy, to build our families, to get educated. And so I just really appreciate your finding those common threads and ensuring that we represent one face, which is a very diverse face of people who believe in what Ronald Reagan taught us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. It's been an honor of my lifetime, Lisa. Thank you again, viewers. This is our end of the Conversations That Count. We'll see you again in 2 weeks. I'll be off next week, and God bless you all. I hope you continue to tune in. We will continue to bring in great speakers. In 2 weeks, I will be bringing in our NFRW president, National Federation of Republican Women president, on Conversations That Count. She also will be talking about what she is trying to accomplish throughout the nation to bring in more women Republican leaders as political leaders, and also bringing in more women into Republican Party. Looking forward to seeing all of you again on Conversations That Count. Continue to support. God bless you all, and God bless America. Thank you.